It is time.
What? Time for what? This stuff keeps happening, and I about this ghost magic stuff. Oh, hello.
How'd you get out of storage? Alright, I'm getting sick of this magic stuff, but I'll still review the ink. Today we are taking a look at the Higgins India Ink Drawing Ink. Now guys, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time, simply because Higgins seems to be the go-to ink for comics. It's gotten a great reputation, and I want to see if that reputation is earned, because it is mentioned by name and picture in the DC Comics Guide to Inking. It is also mentioned in a picture in Marvel's How to Draw Comics the Marvel's Way. I believe it was mentioned in How to Draw Noir Comics. Couldn't find it in the first few pages, but I remember it being mentioned towards the end. And again, I believe it was mentioned in the DC Comics Guide to Creating Comics towards the end of the book. I couldn't find the exact mentioning, but my memory remembers it. Now, normally this is actually where I would show you guys the packaging and talk a little bit about it, but I accidentally threw it away. So we're just going to jump straight into the inkwell design. Now, I actually really like this inkwell because it's very unique. It stands out on top of a shelf, and it's very Higgins. So when you think of this shape, you think of Higgins ink. It's just plastic. I prefer glass ones because they're a little more sturdy, and the top can unscrew to reveal a little eyedropper, which I'm not a huge fan of, but given the long neck of the bottle, I'm okay with that because this would actually let you get that ink easier. It's got the Higgins logo, kind of crudely printed because there's some areas where it's more white and there's some areas where it's really grainy. So that was kind of weird. They have a few different versions of this on top of some other different inks. For example, they have a black magic ink, which I'm not sure what the difference actually is. They both say drawing, but they don't highlight the differences between the two. On top of that, I actually got this at Cherry's, but at Michael's you can also find ink in this type of container, more for calligraphy. But this one is the Eternals one, which on the back of the packaging says it's good for calligraphy and lettering. But is it good for drawing? And if so, why do I get more ink for like the same price as this? Because this sells for an average of $4.45 to $6.45 depending on where you go. And then this sells for the exact same price. On top of that, I have seen other pigments of this, like for example, Jerry's Art Emporium. They have all the pigments there. So that's one thing I do find a little confusing about Higgins, is that they're not very clear on what's what. Now, as always, we'll be taking a look at this ink in our Batman sketchbook. First impressions. Honestly, not good. It is a decently smooth ink. However, I am noticing some major edge bleedage. This is not good at all, because that means my lines are going to be very inconsistent. Now, that may be a case with the paper I'm using, because this isn't the paper I illustrate on. I actually illustrate on Bristol board. Now, I do want to do the quill nib test, and I do want to do a brush test in the sketchbook. But I do have a piece of Bristol board right here that will do our test on that. So maybe it's just the paper itself, it's more ink absorbing than most. Here's our quill nib. The pigment itself is really, really nice. But again, noticing some bleeding. Now with the quill nib, it's a little darker. Here there's a little bit of gray. That is very weird. Huh. I've never had that problem before using an ink. Let's use the brush, and then after that we'll do it on Bristol board, see maybe it's just the paper. Here we go. I will say it's a lovely pigment. Lovely, lovely pigment. Again, noticing some of the edges are bleeding. It's turning gray, bleeding a little bit through the paper. Let's use our Bristol board. That's a lot better than the results we got before. However, in person, there's a little bit of edging. So that's different from the bleeding, because the bleeding, it bleeds out. With the edging, it actually is an edge being cut almost into the ink line. Okay, you kind of see it here a little bit. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm going to try my quill nib. Maybe the problem is just the nib itself. Okay, so the edging isn't as bad with the quill pen. Definitely get some really nice thick lines too, which I like. And it is staying more consistently black, because on the paper, it looked like the paper was absorbing the ink and it was becoming gray. Here it's staying black. It is drying pretty quick. Oh, no, never mind. It's not drying pretty quick at all. Let's try a brush. I'm really curious how this is going to work. And if you hear chains rattling or like keys hitting each other, it's actually my dog. She's just running around my room. Alright, look at that. That's actually not bad. Now let's see it dry, and it's probably going to, say it with me, bleed through an edge. While this is drying, I want to know if these lines are waterproof. Now they've had plenty of time to dry, so let's soak up our brush and just test them. I don't think this is waterproof. The lines are definitely being affected. Is that the difference? Is the Black Magic waterproof? That may be why this one is being so difficult, because this is non-waterproof. It's not consistently black. I am noticing some patches of gray showing through, which I don't like at all. Originally, I had a nicer illustration planned for this because I was really happy to use it. After using it, I'm saying it's kind of crap, and I'm going to do a different illustration simply because I don't want to ruin my actual nice drawing, and I'm going to save that for a nicer ink. So today's illustration is completely different from what I had planned. I'm not wasting the illustration that I really want to ink really well on this crap. So instead, I have a very simple, basic illustration of Wrath. He's just flying in the air. Also worth noting is that this paper is actually different. This is my normal go-to sketching paper before I switch to Bristol board. So I'll put the stats on screen now so you guys can take a look at that. I'm just going to go in and wish me luck. Probably isn't going to end well. Either way, roll that time lapse. And thus began the inking process, which was interesting. There were parts I did enjoy, but parts I really did not. My lines were very messy. I noticed that there was a lot of bleeding and a lot of jaggedness that I did not like. The ink did not damage my nibs at all, and on top of that, I did notice some friction, but not enough to damage the paper. So as I was inking the piece, I thought about how I could incorporate that into a messy look that would actually justify the look of the line work, and I think I succeeded with what I got when I was going forward. I started to learn that maybe this is an ink not used for dip pens. Perhaps this is more as a fill-in ink, which became very apparent when I started to fill in the piece. See, when I started filling it in, I noticed that there were areas that were not true black. It looked true black wet, but quickly would dry into a 70 to 80% black. As I was continuing to inking the piece, I noticed the benefits of this. You can allow for actually some really cool organic shading. Do a base layer as your lights, and then go in for darker areas. I incorporated a little bit of it in the artwork, but definitely could be used and explored in future pieces that I might do when revisiting the ink. The ink was very easy to control with my brush, and I used a variety of them. After the entire piece was done, I noticed the ink dried almost instantly, which was a huge benefit, so I didn't have to worry about actually smudging it with my hand. I then decided to add the messy under part. The original idea was it's a monster of tentacles, arms, mass, and limbs, kind of Cthulhu, kind of H.P. Lovecraft inspired, and just have it so Wrath was escaping from it. The name of this piece quickly came into fruition, Escape from Hell. Why? I just kind of like the name of that. After that, I decided to add a spray effect, something that I do like the look of in my artwork, and I even started at the corner and went with the direction that Wrath was moving, specifically to actually amplify that movement in the piece. After inking it, I did notice that I actually wasn't very happy with the contrast. It was too much in my opinion, so I decided to do a pretty simple ink wash. I took out my palette and decided to mix the inks, using careful ratios of water and ink to get the right gray, testing it on a separate piece of paper before putting it on the piece itself. I originally thought about using the ink wash on Wrath's wings, but instead decided to do the background. The bottom would be a mixture of different tones of black, and then Wrath himself would mostly be composed of white and mostly composed of solid black. This will allow Wrath to pop out and stick out even more, despite taking up the center mass of the image. It's almost symbolic with him having the only white on him. As the piece is Wrath Escapes from Hell, it makes sense that he is white because he's kind of the light in the darkness. Kind of weird how I thought about that on the spot, but it really did fit the piece. And we're done. Guys, this was an interesting piece. And like always, this piece is available on my ArtStation account for a $1 digital download. Just click that first link in the description down below. Really helps the channel out. And on top of that, you can use it as a background for all your devices. Now, illustrating this piece really showed me the benefits of Higgins ink. It is a layering ink, which for me, I don't really enjoy that much. Simply because I prefer my ink to dry true black and use traditional rendering techniques, such as highlights and cross-hatching to create my areas of gray and contrast. Now, the thing about layering ink is that I did get some cool layering effects in here. And on top of that, it does have merit to it. Like characters like Spider-Man, Venom, Spawn, Batman, they all would look really cool with this ink because you can use that to bring out depth in pure black characters. And on top of that, the ink wash was super fun. This ink excels with a brush and it's a joy to use with a brush, but as someone who's judging an ink from a total package angle, I'm not just looking at its layering capabilities. I do think it's a decent ink and I could see the advantage of using it, but this is an ink not for me. If I'm doing maybe a large mural of Wrath where I would actually like to do layering shading, I would definitely use this. That's why on a scale of 1 to 10, the Higgins ink gets a 6, just a little bit above average. I do love the washing that you can get with it, but its weak line work and the fact that it doesn't dry true black because of its problematic layering does hold it back for me. I can definitely see in some ways how this is an industry standard, but it's not the complete package for me. But that's my opinion, and I'd love to hear you guys' opinions in the comment section down below. Do you guys agree with my rating for the Higgins ink, or do you think that's the total package and it's the perfect ink that everyone seems to think it is except for me? Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more art and animation based content. I'm J.A.R. of BATTLEBrawlerproductions, and I draw power in my own soul.